Hello, and welcome back to Drowsy History. Settle in, let the blanket find its weight, let your eyes rest closed if they want to, and let today, whatever kind of day it was, begin its slow walk out of the room. You don't need it anymore. Wherever you're listening from, whatever hour your clock is keeping, you're welcome here. Tonight, we're going somewhere this channel has never gone. We're leaving Europe entirely, leaving its castles and its candle smoke, and traveling to one of the most astonishing cities that has ever existed on this earth. A city of canals and floating gardens, built on a lake, home to more people than London or Paris in the same years, so clean and so orderly that the first Europeans to see it wrote home asking whether they were dreaming. Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec world. The year is 1495, more or less, a generation before everything changes, and tonight you will live one full day there, from the drums before dawn to the last conch call of the night watches. But you won't live it as a king or a warrior or a priest. You'll live it at the very bottom, in the role the history books rush past. You'll live it as a slave. And here is tonight's promise, offered right up front. Almost everything that word just made you picture is wrong, and the truth is stranger, more humane, and more surprising than anything you're imagining. Yet the title of tonight's journey still holds. You would not survive this day, not because of chains, there are no chains, but because of something far quieter, and we'll discover it together, hour by hour. Before we set out, if these slow journeys into vanished worlds help you rest, consider subscribing. It helps this little channel more than you know. And tonight's question for the comments is one of my favorites we've ever asked. What is the oldest story your family still tells? A name that got handed down, a voyage someone survived, a rumor no one could ever quite confirm. Leave it below, however small. You'll see by the end of tonight why those stories matter more than almost anything else in history. And if you don't have one, that's all right. Just tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. Now, lower the lights, slow your breathing. Far away and long ago, on a lake ringed by mountains, a city of 200,000 souls is asleep, and before the sun clears the volcanoes, you'll be awake inside it. Let's begin the way we like to begin, by gently taking the picture in your head apart. Say the word slavery, and your mind builds something specific. Chains, auction blocks, whips, human beings owned like livestock from birth to death, children inheriting their parents' bondage forever. That picture comes from the Atlantic world, from centuries closer to our own, and it is one of the deepest wounds in human history. It is also, and this is the first great surprise of tonight, almost useless for understanding what you're about to live through. The Aztecs had slavery. They called an enslaved person a Tlatelolco, and tonight that word means you. But listen to what the institution actually was, because the historians who reconstructed it from the old codices and the elders' testimony were startled themselves. An Aztec slave could not be born. Read that again, slowly, because it changes everything. Slavery did not pass to children. A Tlatelolco's sons and daughters came into the world exactly as free as anyone else's. Whatever happens to you today, it ends with you. There is no such thing anywhere in this empire as a slave bloodline. An Aztec slave could own things, property, goods, money, and we'll meet the money later today. It grows on trees And that's not a joke. A slave could even, and the sources are clear on this, own other slaves. Sit with that impossibility for a moment. A slave with servants of his own was rare, but the law allowed it, and the law is what tells you what a society actually believes. An Aztec slave could marry, and not only other slaves. A slave could marry a free person. A female slave could marry her own master, and some did, and their children were freeborn and legitimate. A slave could testify. A slave could complain of mistreatment. A slave could not simply be sold on a whim. As we'll see, selling a person against their will required a formal public process with witnesses that took months to complete and was designed at every step to fail. And a slave could stop being a slave. Freedom could be bought back by the slave, by their family, for the same price that had been paid, and a freed Tlatelolco carried no mark, no stigma, no asterisk. Yesterday's slave was simply today's citizen. Several of the paths out, in fact, were faster than purchase, and one of them, my favorite fact of the entire night, involves nothing more than running, and we will watch it happen this afternoon in the middle of a crowded market. So, what was this institution really? The closest honest description is this: Aztec slavery was what happened when a life went wrong. It was the empire's bottom rung, its debtor's floor, its bankruptcy court, a condition you fell into through famine, debt, crime, or catastrophe, and were expected eventually to climb out of. Most slaves did the same work as poor free people, ate the same food, spoke the same language, wore more or less the same clothes, and slept under a roof in the same neighborhoods. Which raises the obvious question, and I can hear you asking it through 6 centuries. Then why wouldn't I survive it? Because this world runs on rules the way our world runs on electricity, invisibly, everywhere, lethally. Tenochtitlan is one of the most ordered, most law-dense, most etiquette-saturated societies that has ever existed. Every fiber you wear, every word's politeness level, every cup you drink, every glance at the wrong person is governed. The people around you have been trained in those rules since birth, in actual schools, and will visit those schools because this city educates every single child, which almost nowhere on earth will do again for centuries. You have not been trained, and in this city, ignorance of the rules is the one thing that has no excuse and no protector. The chains you imagined don't exist here. What exists instead is a lattice, beautiful, intricate, and absolutely unforgiving. Today, you'll walk through it, step where I tell you to step. One more distinction, and then the city gates. There was a second population in this world that the word slave gets wrongly attached to: captives taken in war. Their story runs on entirely different tracks toward a very different destination, and we will pay it the sorrowful visit it deserves this evening, briefly and with respect, because we don't look away on this channel, but we don't linger in dark rooms either. For now, hold the distinction. The war captive belonged to the gods. You, the Tlatelolco, belong to the ledger. Today is about the ledger. Now, wake up. The drums are about to start. Before dawn, from your sleeping mat, the first thing you know of Tenochtitlan is its sound. And the sound of this city at 4 in the morning is grinding stone. Tens of thousands of them. In every house, on every island street, women are already kneeling at the metate, the sloped grinding stone working maize into dough for the day's tortillas, and the sound rolls across the water in one continuous soft thunder, like surf that never arrives. Travelers wrote that you heard Tenochtitlan before you saw it. This is what they heard: a whole civilization, grinding its breakfast in the dark. Now rise quietly. You'll learn why quietly matters within the hour, and step to the doorway of your master's compound. And look, because the sun is coming up behind the volcanoes, and the city is lighting like a lamp. You are standing on an island in a lake, ringed by mountains, at 7,000 feet. The air is thin and cold and astonishingly clear. Around you spreads a city of perhaps 200,000 people. Some scholars say more, which makes it larger than almost any city in Europe in this year. It is not built along streets, it is built along water. Canals run where roads would run, gridded and straight, busy already with canoes, and there are said to be tens of thousands of canoes on this lake, moving food, flowers, firewood, people, everything, in silent traffic that never fully stops. 3 great causeways stride out across the water to the mainland, wide enough for 10 men abreast, pierced with wooden bridges that can be lifted. An aqueduct runs beside one of them, carrying sweet spring water from the hill of Chapultepec into the heart of the city in twin channels. Twin, so that when one is cleaned, the other flows. Fresh water piped to public basins in a city on a salt lake. Rome managed this. Almost nowhere else on earth in 1495 has, and the city is clean. This is the detail that undid the first Europeans who saw it, coming as they did from towns that dumped their filth in the street. Tenochtitlan's streets are swept every day by an army of cleaners the city employs, 1,000 men by some accounts. Waste is collected by canoe and carried to fertilize the fields. Nothing is wasted in a lake world. Household fires burn smokeless clean. The whole city smells of water, maize, marigolds, and copal incense drifting down from the temples. When the Spanish soldiers finally marched up that southern causeway, a quarter century after tonight, hardened men who had seen Venice and Constantinople, they wrote that they turned to each other and asked if they were dreaming, whether the towers rising from the water were real at all. One of them, as an old man, wrote that even remembering it was like remembering an enchantment. At the center of everything, where the causeways meet, the sacred precinct lifts the great temple 100 feet or more into the dawn, twin shrines at its summit, smoke already rising from the eternal fires, so high that the priests up there catch the sunrise minutes before the streets do. This is the city you serve in, and here's the thing to carry with you all day, the thing that will keep surprising you. Everything you just admired runs on order. The clean streets, the synchronized canoes, the water that always flows. None of it is accident. It's law, duty, schedule, and 10,000 small obediences, repeated daily by every person on this island, from the emperor down to, well, down to you. The household is stirring behind you. The fire needs waking. Your day has already started, and you're already almost late for it. Before we follow you into the morning's work, we should answer the question hanging over your sleeping mat. How did you get here? How does a free person in this world become a Tlaxcali at all? The answer, in almost every case, is heartbreakingly ordinary. One bad year. And the roads into slavery tell you more about this world than 100 temple ceremonies. The widest road was hunger. The Valley of Mexico is a miracle of engineering, but it sits at the mercy of frost and rain, and the old people still speak of the terrible years. Above all, the famine in the time called One Rabbit, a generation back, when the frosts came early and then the rains failed year upon year until the granaries emptied and the empire itself could not feed its people. In those years, families faced the arithmetic no family should ever face, and the records tell us plainly what many chose. They sold themselves, or sold a child, to the lowland peoples where the maize still grew, trading a person's freedom for baskets of grain that would keep the rest of the family alive. It was legal, it was regulated. A child sold this way had to be of a certain age, and the price was set, and it was understood by everyone, including the law, as a tragedy with paperwork, which is why the same law left every door back to freedom propped open. A society that watched its own people sell themselves to survive built its slavery ever after with exits. The second road was the gambling mat. This city loves games with a fervor ours would recognize instantly. The great ball game thundering in its stone courts, and everywhere, in every courtyard, patoli, a cross shaped board, beans for dice, fortunes riding on the throws. Men wager cloaks, jewels, houses, harvests, and when everything else is gone, the law permits one final stake himself. The codices show the players hunched over the board, and the histories record the men who rose from it, owning nothing, not even their own hands. If part of you finds that unimaginable, another part of you, I suspect, finds it very imaginable indeed. Every age has its patoli. The third road was debt and theft, and here the Aztec logic is so different from ours, it takes a moment to focus the eyes. This world has no prisons to speak of. If a man steals and cannot repay, locking him in a room strikes the Aztec mind as absurd. The victim gains nothing, the thief's labor rots. Instead, the thief is given to the person he robbed to work off the value of what he took. Slavery here is the sentence, restitution, made of time. When the debt is worked out, the man walks free. You can question the system. History invites us to question every system, including our own, but you can't call it thoughtless. And the last road was simply choice, which may be the strangest one of all. A person could sell themselves, openly, legally, for a good price paid up front, and some did, in hard seasons or old age, exchanging freedom for guaranteed food, shelter, and a place in a wealthy household. The transaction happened before witnesses, and by custom, the seller was allowed to remain free until the purchase price was spent. Some of the elderly poor reckoned a master's kitchen better than a free man's hunger. In a world without pensions, it was for some the only retirement plan on offer. Famine, the gambling mat, the debt ledger, the hard bargain of old age. Notice what's missing from that list: birth. Nobody is on this road because of who their parents were. Every slave in Tenochtitlan tonight has a story that begins "I was free," and almost every one of them intends the story to end that way too. Yours began with maize, a bad harvest, a sick season, a family ledger that wouldn't balance, and a price paid before witnesses. It could have been anyone's story. That's precisely the point of it. Now, the fire. Truly, it cannot wait any longer. Your household wakes the way the whole city wakes, to drums and shells. All night long, from the summit of the great temple and from every neighborhood shrine, The priests have kept the watches, rising at their appointed hours to offer incense, sound the great wooden drum, and blow the conch trumpets whose low moan carries clear across the water. The city keeps time by them, all night, every night. Nobody in Tenochtitlan has ever slept out of earshot of the god's clock. The final watch sounds in the dark before dawn, and at that signal, an entire civilization gets up. Priests to their fires, farmers to their canoes, and you from your reed mat in the corner of the household you serve, up into the cold mountain air, quick, because the Tlacotli rises first. Take stock of where you are, because it's not where the word slave told you you'd be. You sleep inside the family compound of your master, a prosperous merchant household in one of the southern neighborhoods, a cluster of adobe and stone rooms around a swept courtyard, everything facing inward to the fire. You sleep on the same kind of mat as everyone else in the house. You are covered by the same kind of maguey fiber cloak that the free servants and the poor relations wear. You ate last night from the same pot. If a stranger looked into this courtyard at this hour, watching the household stir, he could not immediately tell you from the family's own until the work began, and he saw who did which parts of it, and who spoke first to whom, and know the people you serve, because you'll spend the whole day orbiting them. The master is a trader, not one of the great guild merchants who cross the empire with armed caravans, but a solid dealer in cloth and salt, with a stall interest at the great market, and ambitions his wife manages downward at intervals. The mistress runs the compound the way the empire runs its provinces, thoroughly and with excellent intelligence. There's the grandmother, who came with the marriage and outranks everyone, including, arguably, the gods. Two children still at home, a married cousin's family in the second building, an elderly free servant who has simply always been here, a flock of turkeys with a collective grudge, and you, 14 souls around one fire. When the histories say slaves in this world lived inside households rather than under them, this courtyard is what they mean. That's your condition, in one image, invisible difference, enforced by 1,000 visible rules. The compound is stirring around you. The grandmother is already at the metate, that grinding thunder again, close now, rhythmic as breath. The master's wife is laying out the day. Children are being extracted from blankets, complaining exactly as children have always been extracted from blankets. Somewhere, a turkey is making the morning's first bad decision. Your work starts with fire and dirt, in that order, and both of them, this being Tenochtitlan, are more dangerous than they sound. Fire first. In the main room, the 3-stone hearth has burned down to embers overnight, and it falls to you to wake it, feeding in the dried maize cobs and the split oak, coaxing the flame up under the comel, the wide clay griddle, so that it's evenly hot by the time the first tortillas want it. Do it carefully, and not only because fire is fire. In this world, the hearth is not equipment, it is a presence. The fire has a name and an honored old age. The people call him the old god, the oldest of all, and the 3 stones around him are not to be stepped on, not to be treated with disrespect, not ever. Every Aztec child learns this before they learn to walk steadily. You do not step on the hearthstones. You do not spit toward the fire. You do not toss refuse into it as though it were merely burning wood. A modern person Tidying up would feed the fire some scrap of rubbish within the first hour and mark themselves in front of the whole household as something between a barbarian and a blasphemer. Strike one, and the sun isn't even fully up. The fire is fed properly, with fuel, with respect, and at certain moments with a small offering, a drop of the household's food, because he eats first, he always eats first. Then the sweeping, and here, listener, we arrive at one of the most quietly beautiful facts of the entire Aztec world. Sweeping is worship. Not like worship, it is worship. The act of clearing dust from the ground is, in this civilization's deep grammar, a sacred act. It renews the world, holds back disorder, and honors the gods, and it is performed at dawn in every household, every temple, and every palace in the empire, more or less simultaneously. The emperor's own precincts are swept with ceremony. Priests sweep the temple platforms as a holy office. Mothers teach daughters the dawn sweeping as both chore and prayer, the same motion serving both, indistinguishable. One of the empire's most beloved goddesses carries a broom as her emblem, and the great festival month of the harvest season is named in Nahuatl the sweeping of the roads. So when you take up the broom of bound twigs and begin on the courtyard, long, even strokes working outward from the fire, understand what the household sees. They don't see menial labor assigned to the lowest member. They see the day's first devotion performed on the family's behalf. Done well, it is noticed the way a well-said grace is noticed. Done sloppily, it is not lazy, it is profane. The difference between a servant and a slattern in this courtyard is theology. You sweep. The dust rises gold in the first horizontal light. In 10,000 courtyards across the island, 10,000 brooms are making the same sound, a dry hush under the grinding stones, the whole city cleaning itself awake the way a cat does. Then water. The household jars need filling, and this being a city on a salt lake, fresh water is a delivered commodity, drawn from the aqueduct's public basins or bought from the water canoes that ply the canals each morning, selling spring water by the jarful. You carry the big clay vessels down to the canal steps, flag the water seller with the low, respectful greeting you've learned. Everything here has a correct greeting, graded precisely to the speaker and the spoken to, and Nahuatl itself bends into special reverential forms that you, a beginner, mangle constantly, and you haul the filled jars back up the steps, arms burning pleasantly, breath smoking in the cold. Pause there on the steps a moment, jars balanced, and look down the canal. Mist on the water, canoes sliding through it, laden with green vegetables and orange flowers, paddled by farmers who left the floating gardens while the stars were still out. The smell of 100 breakfasts starting. Say what you will about this morning, and it's work, real work, and it isn't yours by choice, but there are worse views from the bottom of a world. Back inside, the komal is hot, the dough is ready, and the household is gathering toward the fire. Which brings us to breakfast, and to the small, everyday miracle this entire civilization is built on. Everything in this valley, the city, the empire, the temples, the 200,000 lives around you, is built on a single plant, and breakfast is its daily coronation. Maize. Corn, but not the sweet yellow afterthought our century knows. Maize here is the center of the cosmos, the stuff human beings themselves were made from in the old stories, a being owed courtesy. Spilled kernels are picked up from the ground, and children are taught that grain left lying weeps. You will handle maize all day, every day, and you will handle it politely. By the fire, the morning's dough, soaked overnight with lime and ash in the process that unlocks the grain's hidden nourishment, then ground on the metate through the dark hours, is being slapped between the grandmother's palms in that quick, impossibly skilled patting rhythm, pat, 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 and laid on the comal. The smell of toasting tortillas rises through the courtyard, and if there is a better smell to be poor next to, history has not recorded it. Breakfast, for you, comes mid morning after the first work. 2 or 3 warm tortillas, a scoop of beans, salt, and chilies. Always chills, the seasoning of the entire world here, from the emperor's table to yours. Wash it down with atole, the warm maize gruel, thick and faintly sweet, a drink that is also somehow a hug. On feast days, it might be sweetened with honey or amaranth. On ordinary days, it is simply warm, and at 7,000 feet on a cold morning, warm is a feast. And here is the honest surprise, the one the historians keep arriving at. You eat what the free poor eat. The same tortillas, the same beans, the same squash and greens and chilies. On good days, the pot holds fish from the lake, or a duck, or the little dishes this lake world harvests that would make a modern eater blink. Waterfowl eggs, the prized green lake cakes skimmed from the water's surface and dried into savory bricks, delicacies of insect eggs gathered from the reeds that the wealthy pay well for. The lake feeds everyone. Hunger, in a normal year in this city, is rare. The markets and the tribute canoes see to that. Your belly, Tlatelolco, is not your problem. Your problem is the cup you must never drink, and the cloth you must never wear. Which brings us, carefully now, watch your step, to the lattice. To understand why the rules of this city would destroy you in particular, you have to understand the most astonishing statistic in the Aztec world, one that almost no civilization on Earth will match again for 400 years. Every child in Tenochtitlan goes to school. Every child, not noble children, every child's boys and girls, rich and poor, the sons of lords and the daughters of porters. It is compulsory, it is universal, and it is enforced. There are 2 great school systems, the Kalmakak, the strict temple schools, where noble children and the brightest others are trained for priesthood and command, famously severe, with midnight vigils and cold water discipline, and the Telpachkali, the neighborhood houses of youth of 1 to every district, where everyone else learns the arts of ordinary citizenship. Work, war, song, and above all, conduct. And conduct is the point. From their first years, Aztec children are marinated in formal instruction about how to be a person, and we know this in loving detail, because the elders later dictated the actual speeches to the friars who wrote them down. The Huehuetlatoli, they're called, the words of the elders, long formal orations delivered at every threshold of life, and they are among the most beautiful moral documents any civilization has produced. Walk quietly, they teach, speak softly, and only when spoken to. Do not interrupt, do not stare, rise before dawn, waste nothing, guard your dignity and everyone else's. The elders speak of a child as a precious jade, a quetzal feather, and then polish that jade with 20 years of relentless etiquette. The result is a citizenry trained to a shared choreography so deep It looks to outsiders like a national personality. Everyone knows the graded forms of the language because Nahuatl itself has politeness built into its bones, reverential endings that wrap a sentence in respect, and choosing the wrong register is not a slip, it's a statement. Everyone knows who bows to whom, who steps aside on the causeway, when to lower the eyes, how to accept a gift with the correct self deprecation, how loud a voice may be in a market, in a court, in a temple's shadow. Everyone, that is, except you. This is the education you never received, the 20-year apprenticeship in being Aztec that every free adult around you completed, and you are faking. The household forgives your fumbles mostly. A slave bought from hardship is expected to be rough edged, and your master's family corrects you the way one corrects a foreigner, which is what you effectively are. But the city beyond the courtyard gate is not your family, and the city, as we're about to see, does not grade on a curve. Here it is then, the heart of the title, the reason you, specifically, would not survive this day, laid out like the lattice it is, wire by wire. Start with the cloth on your back. There are laws in this empire about clothing, real laws with real teeth, and they are beautifully simple. Cotton is for the nobility. The soft, gorgeous, embroidered cottons that flow through the markets are legally reserved for the Pippleton, the noble class, and for those the emperor has personally honored. Commoners, and you are below the commoners, wear cloth of maguey fiber, the coarse agave weave, plain or minimally patterned. The laws go further. They govern how long a cloak may hang, who may wear sandals in the royal presence. No one lords go barefoot before the emperor, who may wear lip plugs, and which stones, whose house may have a second story. An entire society, dressed by statute, legible at a glance exactly like the fool's world of Motley and Ermine we visited a few weeks ago, except that here the penalties climb far past embarrassment. Wear what is above you, and the law may take more than the garment. You'd have broken this one by noon. Some kind soul hands you a fine cast off cloak against the cold. You wrap yourself in it gratefully, and you have just committed a crime with your shoulders. Now the cup. The drink of this world, beyond water and a toll, is pulque, the milky, gently alcoholic ferment of the maguey plant. And around pulque, the Aztecs have built perhaps the strictest sobriety regime of any society in history. Drunkenness, they teach, is the root from which every other evil grows. The elders' speeches return to it again and again with something close to horror. And so the law rations intoxication by status and age. Ritual occasions permit a measured cup. The elderly, their labors done, may drink more freely. Old age here has few privileges, but this is genuinely one of them. For everyone else, public drunkenness is a serious crime. For a commoner, a first offense brings public disgrace, the head shorn in the plaza, the family shamed, by some accounts the house itself pulled down. For nobles and officials, the law is harsher still, because rank is supposed to mean discipline. And for the repeat offender of any station, the law's final penalty was the one this legal system reserved for those it deemed beyond correction, and it did not mean exile. We'll say it plainly once, gently, and move on. This city executed its incurable drunks. The sorrow of that severity belongs to its world, not ours, and the Aztecs themselves spoke of it sorrowfully. The elders' speeches mourn the drunkard even while the law condemns him. You see the wire, though, you, a modern person, At a festival, offered a second cup by someone smiling. It is the most natural mistake of your century. It is nearly the largest mistake available in this one. And then the thousand smaller wires, the ones with social rather than legal current in them, meeting a noble's litter on the causeway and not stepping aside with lowered eyes, speaking to an official in the plain register like an equal with one suffix, and the sentence goes from question to insolence, laughing too loudly in the wrong shadow, touching goods in the market with the wrong casualness, walking through a temple precinct as though it were a shortcut, which it is, and which it absolutely is not, handling maize like cargo, stepping, after everything you were told this very morning, on the hearthstones. None of these alone ends you. What they do is accumulate. In a face to face city of neighborhoods and registries, where every person belongs to a district and every district notices everything, you would spend your days spending a currency you don't have, the benefit of the doubt. A Tlatelolco's security, his path back to freedom, his protection from the darker turns we'll visit this afternoon, rests almost entirely on reputation, on being known as respectful, orderly, correctable. The system, as we'll see, gives even a difficult slave chance after formal chance. But the chances are judged by the household and the neighborhood, and the judges are people you would have baffled, offended, and alarmed a dozen times before your first sunset. That's the honest answer, listener, and it's stranger than chains. What would kill you here isn't cruelty, it's fluency. Everyone around you is fluent in a language of conduct they began learning at their mother's grinding stone, and you are illiterate in it. And this is a world where that particular illiteracy has consequences ours reserves for felonies. But cheer up, truly, because the household certainly can't have you moping. The morning's errand is the best hour of your entire day, and it's waiting at the canal steps. You're going to the market, and not just any market, the market. Bring the big basket. One more thing to understand before you're allowed out the courtyard gate with that market basket, because the moment you step into the street, you enter the institution that actually runs this city, and it isn't the emperor, it's the neighborhood, the Kalpuli they call it, the big house, and every soul in Tenochtitlan belongs to one. The city isn't really one city at all. It's dozens of these districts fitted together like Chinampa plots, each one a complete small world, its own temple, its own Telpochkali school, its own patron god, its own elected headman, its own lands and registries, its own festivals, in some districts, even its own trade. This one, the feather workers' quarter, that one, the goldsmiths, another where the mat makers have woven for 6 generations. A Kalpuli keeps its own roles, who lives in which house, who owes which taxes, whose son has entered the school, whose field is whose. When the empire needs soldiers, it asks the Kalpuli. When the city needs canal dredgers or 1,000 street sweepers, it asks the Kalpuli. The empire, seen from the street, is mostly a federation of neighborhoods that know exactly where everyone is. Feel what that means for daily life, because it cuts both ways, and both edges matter to you. The warm edge first. Nobody in this city is anonymous, which means nobody in this city is abandoned. The Kalpuli is a mutual aid society the size of a small town. It feeds its widows, schools its orphans, works its sick members' fields, buries its dead with proper ceremony whether or not the family can pay. A man of the district who falls on hard times deals with headmen who have known him since boyhood, who knew his father, and the elders' speeches are blunt about the duty. The neighbor is not a stranger. In a world with no insurance, no police force as we'd know it, and no anonymous crowd to disappear into, the district is the safety net, the court of first resort, and the reason the famine roads into slavery weren't even wider than they were. Many a family on the edge was caught, quietly, by its calpulli before it ever reached the selling point. Now, the other edge, the one that concerns you professionally, a community that catches everyone, also sees everyone. The headman's registries know every household's composition, including its slaves. The old men on the benches by the district temple have watched this street for 50 years and can tell a stranger's walk at 200 paces. The women at the fountain basin run an intelligence service that the emperor's own spies would envy. Every neighbor knows the master's family, knows their standing, knows, within a day of your purchase, exactly who you are, what you cost, and how the household came to need you. For a Tlatelolco, this is the whole game. Remember the 3 warnings, the formal admonitions before witnesses that alone can lead to the collar. Those witnesses are these people. The neighborhood is the jury of your entire life, impaneled permanently, session never adjourned. A slave known in his district as steady, respectful, hard-working is functionally armored. No master lightly stands before neighbors who like the man and declares him incorrigible, and the histories suggest such declarations were rare precisely because they were so public. But a slave the district has marked as trouble, surly at the fountain, loud in the wrong shadow, careless at festivals, walks around in a court that is always in session, quietly assembling its verdict. And you, listener, you, the time traveler with your century's habits, would be famous in this district by your second afternoon, not for anything dramatic, for the accumulation, for the too direct eye contact and the too loud laugh, for not knowing the greeting ode to the temple elders, for treating the fountain queue like a line instead of a social order, for the 100 small wrongnesses that a face-to-face world reads the way ours reads a flashing light. None of it criminal, all of it noted, pooled, compared over the grinding stones, and filed in the registry that matters most, the one kept behind 200 pairs of eyes. That's the last wire of the lattice, and the finest one. This world's surveillance isn't a state watching from above. It's a family watching from all sides, with all the warmth and all the mercilessness that families have. So square your shoulders, take the basket, give the old men on the bench the half bow with lowered eyes, exactly as the grandmother drilled you, and walk the street like someone who belongs to a good house. Because you do. And in this city, being known to belong somewhere is worth more than cacao. The canal steps are just ahead, and the household canoe is waiting, and the best hour of your day is about to begin. The household's canoe is a dugout, broad-beamed and patient, tied at the compound's own canal steps, like a car in a driveway, because in this city, that is exactly what it is. You load the empty baskets, hand the master's wife down to her seat with the correct murmured formula, take the paddle at the stern, and push off into the morning traffic. And traffic is the word. The canal is a moving mosaic, farmers' canoes riding low under pyramids of green maize and squash blossoms, a flower boat so loaded it looks like a floating garden bed, marigolds and dahlias stacked in bales, the water sellers on their rounds, a fisherman with the night's catch silvering in the bilge, two priests, black robed, pulled along in silence, children paddling nothing in particular, being children. The morning sun has burned the mist off, and the whole city is out on the water, and the sound of it is unlike any city you've ever known. No wheels, no hooves, no engines. Just water slap, paddle drip, voices, birds, and away behind everything, the drums. You thread north through the canal grid. You know the turns now, left at the neighborhood shrine, under the little wooden bridge where the boys always dangle their feet, and join the broad water avenue running up the island's spine. The great temple slides past on your right, close enough to smell the copal, its twin summit shrines trailing smoke into a blue sky. Whatever else is true of your life, Tlacotli, your commute is one of the most beautiful humanity will ever devise. And then you hear your destination before you see it, a low roar like weather. The Spanish soldiers, decades from now, will describe hearing it a league away and not believing the locals when told what it was. It's shopping. Tie up at the crowded northern steps, help the mistress out, shoulder the baskets, climb and stop, that's because everyone stops, even people who come every day. The great market of Tlatelolco is a paved plaza vast enough to swallow whole towns, arcaded along its sides, and it is generally reckoned among the largest marketplaces existing anywhere in the world in this year. The Spaniards who eventually see it, men who know the markets of Seville and Constantinople's bazaars by reputation, will write flatly that they have never seen its equal for size, order, and abundance, and will estimate the daily crowd in the tens of thousands. Stand at the edge one breath longer and take it the way they took it. An ocean of humanity under the mountain light, ordered into streets and quarters, like a city within the city, humming with that weather roar of 40,000 polite voices. Because, and here is the marvel inside the marvel, it is ordered. Every commodity has its assigned quarter, its own streets. Here the maize dealers, mounted gold and white and blue and red. There the bean and amaranth sellers, the chill street, 40 kinds, a canyon of controlled fire, the fish quarter, the fowl quarter, turkeys and ducks, and the little mute dogs raised for the pot. The greengrocer's rows drowning in tomatoes and avocados and prickly pear. Then the crafted streets, cloth by the warehouse load, maguey weave on one side and, look, don't touch, or remember the wire, noble cotton shimmering on the other. Obsidian blades so fresh they still look wet. Featherwork that moves like oil when the light crosses it. Pottery, mats, rope, paper, pigments, medicine herbs in their own physician-supervised rows, gold and jade under the arcades, and an entire street of barbers, and cooked food lanes where the smell alone is worth the paddle north. Let yourself drift 1 minute down the cooked food lanes, because your stomach has been lobbying since you tied up the canoe. Here the market stops being commerce and becomes pure temptation. Tamales steaming in their husks by the thousand, plain ones, bean ones, festival ones folded around turkey and green sauce, skewers of lakefish crisping over charcoal, stacks of tortillas kept soft in gourds, vats of atole in a dozen flavors, sauces ranked left to right by courage required. Vendors call the old sing-song of every market that ever was. Hot, fresh, over here, none better, and porters eat standing, and judges' clerks eat walking, And somewhere in the din, a child is being bought off with a honeyed amaranth cake, exactly the way children have been bought off since children began. Empires are grand, but this lunch, haggled and steaming, is civilization. Order has officers. The market is patrolled by its own inspectors, who check weights and measures, settle disputes on the spot, and haul cheats before a court of 12 judges that sits at one end of the plaza in permanent session, its verdicts immediate. A vendor caught with a false measure loses his goods before the crowd disperses. The confiscated measure is smashed where everyone can see. The whole apparatus runs on a discipline that would flatter a modern stock exchange, and it never fully closes. Now do your job. The mistress leads, you follow at the correct half step behind, basket ready, eyes working. The household needs maize, beans, chilies, fish for the evening, fuel, and a new mat. And it is your particular skill. A slave who shops well is a treasure and knows it to see where the quality is hiding today. Payment is the part of this world that will delight you forever. There is no coin. The daily currency of the entire empire is the cacao bean. Chocolate, listener? This civilization runs on chocolate, counted out bean by bean for small purchases, by the sack for large ones, valued finely enough that a plump tomato has a known price in beans, and a turkey a much larger one, real enough that counterfeiters actually stuff empty cacao husks with clay, which is why every vendor pinches the beans, and so does the mistress, and so, expertly, do you. For larger purchases, the currency scales up to standardized cotton cloaks, the quashtli, a denomination big enough to price canoes, land leases, and as we will see across the plaza, people. Cacao for pennies, cloth for banknotes, money that can be drunk, and money that can be worn in an economy the size of an empire, working flawlessly. The bargaining is a liturgy of its own, conducted in the courteous register, unhurried, both sides deploying the formal self deprecations. My poor beans, your too generous offer, while giving no actual ground whatsoever. Watch the mistress work the fish seller down, and understand that you are watching a fifth-degree black belt in a martial art your century forgot. Your role is the basket, the pinch test, and the quiet word in her ear that man's chilies were rained on. The mat dealer 2 stalls down is honest, because your eyes are hers today, and being useful is, for you, a load-bearing activity. Fill the baskets, eat the folded tortilla with fire sauce she buys you from a cook stall without comment, because that is how kindness moves in this household, sideways, unannounced. Feel for an hour, almost free, in the roar and glitter of the greatest marketplace of your hemisphere. Then the mistress turns along the plaza's western edge toward the last errand, and the crowd's sound changes as you follow, quieter here, more deliberate, and you realize which street you've come to. They sell people in this market too, and you, of all its customers, cannot look away. We won't either, but we'll look the way this channel looks, carefully, and all the way through until we find the astonishing thing on the far side. Because on this street, in this city, there is a door out of slavery that exists nowhere else on earth, and it is about to fly open 20 feet in front of you. Let's be honest with each other before we walk down this street. There is no version of a slave market that history can make painless, and we won't pretend otherwise. But this one will not be what you're braced for, and the differences matter. They're the whole reason we came. The famous slave markets of the empire are actually elsewhere. The great specialized fair at Azcapotzalco on the western shore is the one the merchants speak of, but Tlatelolco has its street, and here it is, a quiet arcade where perhaps 2 dozen men and women stand or sit with their vendors, and the buyers move slowly, and everyone's voice is lower than it was in the Chile Canyon. Look carefully, because every detail is information. No chains, oh, you knew that, but see it anyway. Some of those for sale wear plain wooden collars, long light yokes at the neck. Hold that image, we'll come back to it within minutes, because that collar is not what it appears. The people themselves are clean, decently dressed, fed. A seller who starved his merchandise would be robbing himself, and some of them, watch, are performing. That one is singing. That woman is demonstrating embroidery stitches in the air with empty hands, quick and proud. That man just made his own vendor laugh. Skilled slaves, singers, dancers, fine weavers, good cooks command real premiums here, and the sales patter is the person themselves showing you what they can do. The prices run in cloaks: 30 quachtly for an ordinary worker, 40 for one who can dance well, which tells you, in one exchange rate, something almost unbearably human about what this world valued, and the buyers are not all what you'd guess either. Yes, wealthy households buying labor, but also, quietly, and this is one of the tender corners of the institution, families buying their own people back. Redemption at the purchase price is an absolute right here. Somewhere on this street this morning, odds are a brother is counting cloaks he spent 2 years assembling, and by noon someone's slavery will simply be over. No ceremony, no stigma, a person stepping back into their own life like a man stepping out of borrowed clothes. Now, the collar. Here is what it actually means, and it is the very center of tonight, the piece of Aztec law that has amazed every historian who ever traced it. In this empire, remember, a slave cannot simply be sold. Your master cannot wake up irritated and send you to the street. To sell a Tlacotli against their will, an owner must first prove the slave incorrigible, and the proof is a formal process. The slave must be publicly admonished before witnesses, not once but 3 separate times, with each warning recorded in the neighborhood's memory. 3 documented chances to correct course. Only after the 3rd failure may the collar be placed and the slave lawfully sold. The collar you're looking at, in other words, isn't mere restraint. It's paperwork. It says, this sale is legal. The warnings were given. A person sold 3 times over, as incorrigible entered the institution's darkest track. That far door, and will stand before it briefly this evening, is real. But the road to it was deliberately built, long, slow, public, and interruptible. And then, there is the door in the other direction, the one I promised you. The law of the marketplace escape, and it is exactly as magnificent as it sounds. If a collared slave, here in the market, can break away, can run, and can make it beyond the market's boundary and set foot on ground outside it, reaching toward the royal palace, then that slave has a legal path to freedom, free, by law, cleanly, permanently. And the law's genius is in the 2nd clause. No one may stop the runner. Only the owner or the owner's son has the right of pursuit. Any other person in that crowd, any helpful bystander, any deputizing hero, who grabs the fleeing slave doesn't earn a reward. He is punished for the interference. By the accounts that survive, he could forfeit his own freedom for it. The state made obstruction so catastrophically expensive that the entire crowd becomes by law a corridor. Think about what that means in practice. A market of tens of thousands and a single running figure, and thousands of people whose legal obligation is to do nothing, to become, for 30 seconds, a parted sea. The old accounts say it happened, standing where you're standing, Tlatelolco, basket on your hip. You may even see it happen. A clatter, a shout that is quickly not taken up. A man in a wooden collar running full stretch through the maze quarter with one single pursuer far behind, and a whole marketplace carefully, deliberately, magnificently getting out of the way. No other slave system we know of built anything like it. A formal, legal, sporting chance, written into the institution's own heart. Whatever else you carry out of tonight, carry that. Somewhere in every human system, even the ones built on ownership, you can find the fingerprints of people who were uneasy about it and left a door unlocked. The mistress finishes her errand. Cloth, not people, the household is not buying today, and you shoulder the loaded baskets and walk back into the roar and the sunlight, and you breathe it out. So does she, you notice. Nobody's favorite street, and if you're still awake, still drifting along somewhere between the market and your mattress, here's tonight's soft question to carry down into sleep and into the comments if you're inclined. That door your family walked through once, in some hard year. The border crossed, the farm left, the war fled, the bad marriage escaped, the town abandoned for the city. Every family has one. A moment somebody ran for the boundary, and the crowd parted. What was yours? Whisper it to the dark, or leave it below. I read everyone. Now, home by canoe, unload a midday meal, and then the afternoon belongs to the mud and the flowers. The best mud on earth, as it happens. The route home from Tlatelolco passes the district ball court, and today you can hear it 2 canals away, a crowd sound rising and crashing like surf. There's a match on. The mistress, to your careful non-surprise, discovers that the canoe needs to pause here, strictly to rest the paddler, of course. She takes a seat on the shaded terrace with the other matrons. You stand at the back with the baskets, which happens to be the best view in the house. The game is Tlachtli, and the court is a masterpiece. A long alley of plastered stone shaped like a capital war, its side walls sloping inward, a stone ring set high on each wall at the center line. The ball is solid rubber. Rubber, a substance your century will not see again for 300 years after this world falls, bouncing with a live muscular violence that no European who later saw it could quite believe. Some of them genuinely wondered if the balls were bewitched. The players, 2 small teams in leather hip guards and padding, may strike it with hips and knees and forearms only, no hands and no feet, and the rallies are astonishing. The ball hammering off the sloped walls, players hurling themselves flat to keep it alive off one hip, the crack of rubber on masonry echoing like something splitting. Scoring runs on faults and lost rallies, but hanging over every match is the legendary ending, the one the crowds come hoping for. If a player ever drives the ball clean through one of those stone rings, an opening barely wider than the ball itself, set higher than a man's head, The game ends instantly. His side wins outright, and by cherished custom, he earns the right to claim the cloaks and jewels of the spectators, which is why, the moment a ring shot drops, the smart section of the crowd is already running. It happens perhaps once in a season. The man who does it dines out on it for the rest of his life. Understand what you're watching, though, because in this world, no game is only a game. Tlactli is played in the old stories by the gods themselves. The great myths turn on ball games between light and darkness, played for the sun's fate, and every court in the empire is, in the deep grammar, a model of the cosmos. The alley, the world, the flying ball, the sun and moon in contest, the rings, the turning points of the sky. The greatest matches are affairs of state. Rulers of rival cities have settled genuine political questions over a court, wagering provinces, and the emperor keeps professional players the way he keeps poets. Down here at district level, it's Saturday sport, gloriously ordinary, old men shouting tactics at players 40 years their junior. But even here, the court sits beside the temple, and everyone in the crowd knows the game is older than the city, older than the lake, old as the light it imitates. And around the edges of the crowd, inevitably, the betting, brisk, universal, and running from the sociable to the catastrophic. Cacao changes hands by the sack, cloaks come off backs, and there at the terrace's end, hunched over their cross-shaped board in the shade, the Patoli players are running their own parallel casino, beans rattling in the throwers' cupped hands, stakes stacked between them, one thin man watching the board with an intensity that has stopped being recreation, and you look at him, Tlatelolco, exactly one beat longer than you should, because you've stood at the far end of where that look leads. The elders' speeches call gambling a river, lovely at the bank, and then the bank is gone. Somewhere behind you in the crowd, a father is explaining the same thing to a son who is watching the cloaks change hands with shining eyes, and the whole scene, the roar, the rubber crack, the beans, the lesson, is so exactly like every arena crowd in every century that for one dizzy moment you could be anywhere, anywhen, standing at the back of humanity itself with a basket on your hip. The match ends on an ordinary rally. No ring shot today. The crowd's cloaks are safe, and the mistress collects you with a glance, entirely refreshed by the rest she arranged for your benefit. Back to the canoe, back into the water traffic, the crowd roar fading behind you, into the ordinary city hum. South now, past the last neighborhoods, out toward the green checkerboard shining at the island's edge. The afternoon is for the gardens, and after the market's roar and the court's thunder, the gardens are exactly what the day and the listener could use. The afternoon takes you south by canoe, out past the city's edge, to the part of your week you'd never admit you look forward to, the Shanampas. Everyone translates it, floating gardens, and the name is too pretty to correct, though the truth is even better. They don't float. A Shanampa is built, a long rectangle of lake, staked out with posts, walled with woven branches, and filled layer upon layer with dredged lake bottom mud and rotting vegetation, until a plot of black, impossibly rich soil stands just clear of the water, anchored at its corners by living willow trees whose roots knit the whole raft that isn't a raft into the lake bed. Build thousands of them, side by side, with canals for streets, and you get what surrounds you now, a checkerboard of gardens and water running to the horizon, green on silver, one of the most productive farming systems human beings have ever devised. No rain worries. The water is right there, bailed up by hand. No exhausted soil. The lake makes more mud every night. Multiple harvests a year, every year. The Chinampas are why a city of 200,000 can exist on a lake at 7,000 feet. This checkerboard feeds it. Your master's household holds rights to several plots out here, and the afternoon's work is the honest, muddy, meditative kind, bailing water up over the seed beds with a wooden scoop, thinning the maize, cutting squash, packing the canoe with the week's vegetables, mudding in seedlings from the nursery bed. The farmers here start seeds in floating nursery mats and transplant them, a trick agronomists will still admire 5 centuries from now. Herons stalk the margins. Dragonflies stitch the air. 2 plots over, a free farming family works their own rows, and their smallest child spends the afternoon solemnly bringing you individual worms as gifts, which you accept with full Nahuatl formality, which makes her run away shrieking with delight every single time. Understand what this afternoon is in the arithmetic of your life. Out here, the difference between slave and free shrinks to almost nothing. The mud is impartial, the work is the same work, and the man bailing water beside you is your master's cousin doing the identical task. Aztec slavery, remember, mostly means doing ordinary work while belonging to someone. And out here, wrist deep in the world's best soil, with the volcanoes standing over the water, belonging to someone feels, for a few hours, like a technicality. It isn't one. Tonight will remind you it isn't one. But the afternoon doesn't know that, and neither do the dragonflies. You load the canoe as the light goes long and gold across the water checkerboard, and you paddle home with the day's food, trailing your hand once, just once, nobody's watching, in the lake. Paddling home through the late afternoon canal traffic, with the mountains going violet behind you, let's take honest stock of your situation, because you've now seen a full working day of it, and the strangest truth of Aztec slavery is ready to land. This institution is built with exits, and everyone inside it can see them. Count the doors with me. The first door is money. You can buy yourself back. The price is fixed and knowable, what was paid for you no more, and everything you earn beyond your duties is yours to keep toward it. And a Tlacotli can earn extra weaving sold at market, a skill hired out on rest days, tips and gifts that custom lets you pocket. The household's ledger and yours are separate things, and the law keeps them separate. Slaves who saved their way out were not miracles here, they were a category. The second door is your family, walking the redemption road we saw this morning, assembling the cloaks, arriving before witnesses, counting out the price. For a slavery born mostly of one bad year, this was the commonest ending of all. The year turns, the family recovers, and they come and get you. The institution assumed they would. It was, at its center, a pawn shop for lives, and pawn shops expect the goods to be reclaimed. The third door is marriage, and it opens further than you'd believe. Marry a free person, and depending on the arrangement blessed by both families, freedom could come with the union. A woman slave who married her master, and it happened often enough that the law had furniture for it, became a wife, full stop, her children legitimate, freeborn, and capable of inheriting. There are lineages in this city, respectable ones, that pass through a grandmother who was once purchased in a market, and no one considers it worth whispering about. Try to find another slave system in history where that sentence can be written. The fourth door opens on its own. Serve a household long and well, and manumission at the master's death was common, written into the equivalent of wills, expected by custom, praised by the moralists. And running beneath all four doors, the bedrock, your children are already free. Whatever today costs you, it is not hereditary. You are not a bloodline's misfortune. You are one person having a hard chapter in a system that officially agrees the chapter should end. And while you're inside the chapter, the law does not go blind. A master who abuses a slave gravely can lose them. The mistreated slave had standing to protest, and the authorities could transfer or free them outright. An owner cannot kill you. That is homicide here, tried as homicide. If your master's family fed you worse than themselves, worked you like a draft animal, or shamed you before the neighborhood, it is the master the neighborhood would judge, because in the elders' moral speeches, the ones every child memorizes, cruelty to the powerless is the mark of a base man, and this is a society that runs on those speeches the way ours runs on contracts. Hold all of that. Now hold the other hand's weight, too, because we promised honesty. The doors are real, and so are the walls. You rise first and sleep last. Your day belongs to someone else's needs. The three warnings road to the collar exists, and at its far end stands the darkest door in this world, which we will face briefly and together before the stars come out. Exit rich is not the same as free, and no one knows that better than the person counting cacao beans toward a price in a jar under a sleeping mat. But as your canoe noses up to the home steps and the smell of the evening fire reaches you, know this too. Of all the forms human bondage has taken on this earth, historians keep returning to this one with something like disbelief, a slavery designed at nearly every joint to be temporary. It's a low bar, set by a brutal category. This world cleared it in a way almost no other did. Unload the vegetables. The grandmother wants the fish, and the courtyard this evening is full of women's work, which is its own story and long overdue for the telling. One more honest question deserves an answer before the evening settles in, because it's the question every sensible listener asks about every past world. What happens down here at the bottom of the lattice when the body breaks? You'd expect the worst. A slave in most of history, sick, is a liability disposed of. So brace for tonight's last surprise, which by now is barely a surprise at all. In this world, if you fall ill, you will be treated promptly, seriously, and by practitioners your own century's historians of medicine regard with genuine respect. Start with the cold arithmetic, because this world is never sentimental first. You cost 30 cloaks. A master who lets 30 cloaks die of a treatable fever is a fool twice over, once at the market and once before the neighborhood, which judges a household by how it keeps its people, and remember whose testimony stands behind every collar. Custom, thrift, and reputation all point the same direction. The sick Tlatelolco is nursed. But beneath the arithmetic runs something warmer, and the elders' speeches say it outright. The household sick are the households, all of them, and a family that feeds its fire and sweeps its courtyard does not let anyone under its roof suffer unattended. You sleep by their fire. When you burn with fever, it's their grandmother who will notice first. She notices everything, and their healer who will be sent for. And the healer is worth the visit. Aztec medicine, when the Europeans finally cataloged it, staggered them. An herbal pharmacy of hundreds upon hundreds of remedies, so vast and so organized that the first great book of American medicine, written after the fall, was simply Aztec plant lore taken down from native physicians. Some of it is empirically brilliant, wound washes that were genuinely antiseptic, bone setting that colonial observers admitted outclassed their own barbers, an obsidian scalpel flaked to an edge finer than modern steel. The market's medicine rows you passed this morning sit under their own inspectors, and the physicians, men and women both, the tissitol, a title held by many women, train in lineages, examine the sick with a bedside method, and know their plants the way the priests know their stars. Fever earns you willow bark bitter infusions and cool sponging. That cut hand from the chinampa steaks gets washed, packed with a sap the healer's prize for closing flesh, and bound. Exhaustion is prescribed. You'll suffer through it somehow. Rest, broth, and the temazcal. Is it all sound? No. And honesty keeps us warm here as everywhere. Alongside the pharmacy runs the other half of their medicine. Illness as an affair of the soul, of offended gods, of forces out of balance, treated with incantation and offering and the reading of signs. A healer might treat your fever with a genuinely effective herb and a genuinely useless prayer in the same visit, unable, like every physician before the modern age, everywhere on earth, to tell you which one worked. Some treatments soothed, some did nothing gently, a few did harm with complete sincerity. It was medicine as the whole pre-modern world practiced it, real knowledge and real magic, braided so tight that neither the healer nor the patient could find the seam. But here's the measure that matters from your mat. You would be cared for, attended, dosed, steamed, prayed over, fed broth by a grandmother with opinions about your recovery schedule. The lattice that constrains you all day holds you now. The same neighborhood that watches you would send its healer. The same household whose fire eats first would feed you before the strong. In the ledger of history's bottom rungs, where sickness so often meant abandonment, the Tlatelolco's sickbed is one more place. This strange institution refuses to behave the way the word slavery promised it would. You're not sick tonight, thankfully, just tired in the honest, muddy, well-fed way the chinampa leaves a body, the kind of tired the temazcal was invented for, and the evening fire, and the mat that's waiting. The courtyard is filling with the click of spindles and the smell of fish and tomatoes. The women's hour has begun, and it has a story that history owes a debt. If you had been made a woman in tonight's borrowed life, your day would have been the same day and completely different, and history owes it a chapter, because most Tlacotan whose lives we can glimpse in the records were doing what the whole female half of this civilization did from dark to dark, transforming maize and thread into life. Start with the grinding, because everything starts with the grinding. Those pre-dawn hours at the metate that woke you this morning, that is women's work, hours of it, every single day, kneeling at the stone, rolling the grinder forward and back in the rhythm that becomes, over a lifetime, as automatic as walking. A household of any size needs more grinding than its own women can supply, and this, more than anything else, is what a female slave was bought for. Her forearms are the household's flour mill. It is punishing, skilled, endless work, and it is also, listen to the grandmother, she'll tell you, the work the whole world rests on. The gods themselves, the old stories say, ground the sacred maize to make mankind. Every woman at a metate is repeating the gesture that made people. This civilization is very good at hiding its poetry inside its chores. Then the weaving, and here a female Tlatelolco could hold real power over her own fate. Every Aztec girl learns to spin and weave the way every boy learns a trade. The spindle is placed in a baby girl's hand at her naming ceremony. That's how deep it goes. But skill runs a spectrum, and at the top of the spectrum, weaving is wealth. Remember what money is here? Cloth. A woman who weaves finely is, quite literally, a mint. Her surplus work, sold at market, is the fastest coin a slave can earn toward her own price. Her skill raises her value in ways that made skilled weavers the treasures of the slave dealer's arcade. And inside the household, the woman whose cloth the mistress wears proudly to festivals is not, whatever the ledger says, at the bottom of anything. A woman's day braided these together with everything else: the cooking, the little ones underfoot, hers freeborn, remember, growing up alongside the family's own, the market, the fetching, the temazcal to tend, and it carried, we should say plainly, a vulnerability the men's day did not. A female slave could be taken as a concubine. The same closeness to the family that could end in marriage and freedom could also simply be pressure without the ending. The sources are honest about both roads, and so will be. Some of these women married their masters, and their granddaughters inherited houses. Some were merely used, and the record keeps their silence. Both were true. In every century, both are true, and the least we can do from ours is not choose the prettier one to remember alone, but remember them working mostly, because that's how their world would have seen them at this hour. The courtyard at dusk, full of the click of spindles and the pat of tortillas, the grandmother telling the story about the rabbit in the moon that the children demand nightly, the fire being fed his drop of the evening meal first, always first. The ledgers of this world recorded women slaves in a line or two, a purchase, a price in cloaks, sometimes just her town of origin standing in for a name. The courtyards knew better. Courtyards always do. The meal is nearly ready, but there's an hour of light left, and one visit we've been postponing all day, and it should be made now, at dusk. In the spirit this channel makes such visits. Set down the spindle. We're going to look at the shadow. Every world has a truth at its center that the visitor must eventually face, and we have reached this one's. We'll face it the way we faced the sorrows of other centuries, on other nights. Honestly, briefly, without a single image you'd need to unsee, and holding the humanity of everyone involved. If you're already drifting, drift on. I'll speak softly, and the household fire will still be burning when we return. The Aztec world practiced human sacrifice. You knew this? It is unfairly nearly the only thing our century knows about them, and the war captives we set aside this morning walked most of them toward it. Not the Tlacotin, not the debt slaves and the famine sold. Your track, as we've seen all day, ran toward redemption and ordinary years. But the captive taken in battle belonged to the gods from the moment of his capture, and the city received him for that purpose, and there is no honest telling of this place that pretends otherwise. What we owe them, the only thing we can still give people 5 centuries gone, is to understand it the way they were asked to understand it, rather than as a horror story told at their expense. The Aztecs believed, as deeply as any people have believed anything, that the universe was not free. The sun's rising was not guaranteed. It was purchased daily by sacrifice, first by the gods themselves, who in the oldest story gave their own lives to set the sun moving, and ever after by humanity, repaying a debt written into the fabric of existence. Life fed on life. This was not cruelty to them, it was physics. And the captive at the center of the great ceremonies was not refuse being discarded, but, in their eyes, a messenger, honored, prepared, mourned, sent to carry the world's debt payment upward. The warrior who took a captive grieved him as kin. We have the poems. They are tender and they are sorrowful, and they were composed by the same civilization that swept its courtyards as prayer and could not bear a child's tears at a naming feast. None of that is offered to excuse. It is offered because pity without understanding is just another way of looking away, and because the alternative, the lurid version, the one that made this topic a carnival for centuries, required forgetting that everyone in the story was a person. The captive who stood at the top of those stairs at dawn had a mother who ground maize in the dark, a town, a name, a small child's memory of being called a precious jade, a quetzal feather. That's what was spent up there. They knew it. It's why their poetry, which loved flowers above every image on earth, kept returning to how briefly flowers last. Hold them a moment, the ones who climbed, then let them go gently, the way we let all of them go, downstream into the dark, with everyone else history spent and forgot. And come back to the courtyard now, truly back. The fire is up, the fish is in the pot with tomatoes and chilies. The children are being summoned from the last of the light, and the evening, the gentle machinery of an ordinary Aztec evening, is ready to hold you for the rest of the night. The shadow has had its due. The rest of tonight belongs to the living. Night in Tenochtitlan comes down like a curtain, mountain fast, the violet deepening behind the volcanoes, the lake going to hammered silver and then to ink, and the household draws in around the fire, the way households have drawn in around fires since fire was new. The evening meal is the day's real one, and tonight it's good. The lake fish from the market, simmered with tomatoes and green chilies, a stack of fresh tortillas working as plate, spoon, and dinner all at once. Beans, roasted squash from your own afternoon's chinampa, which the master's cousin loudly credits to his farming, and everyone loudly disputes. The fire gets his drop first, then age eats before youth, men before women in the formal households, and you last, but from the same pot, the same stack, the same fire's warmth, seated on your mat at the courtyard's edge with a full portion, and the day's ache settling into your shoulders like an animal lying down. Mealtimes here are quiet by rule. The elders' speeches are firm about chatter over food, but quiet is not cold. The grandmother passes you the extra tortilla without looking at you, which is how she does all her kindnesses, so they can't be caught and thanked. The smallest boy falls asleep sitting up, mid bean, and is carried off with his dinner still in his fist. Somebody's turkey commits its final outrage of the day. Perhaps, on rich evenings, there is a small cup of warmed chocolate for the master, frothed, spiced, reddened with achiote. And if the household is the kind this one is, a sip finds its way down the seating order further than the law of luxuries would strictly approve. Nobody reports a courtyard to the sumptuary judges. The lattice, you're learning, has a human slack woven into its privacy. After the meal, if it's your evening for it, comes the institution your aching body has been quietly negotiating for all day, the temazcal, the bathhouse, a low, domed adobe oven of a room at the compound's edge, its outer hearth fired until the inner wall glows, water thrown hissing onto the hot masonry, and then steam, absolute and enveloping, in the herb-scented dark. You switch your own back with bundled grasses, sweat out the canal mud and the market roar and the whole long ledger of the day, and emerge scalded pink into the cold mountain night feeling. There is no other word, and it's the right word in every century: reborn. This civilization bathes constantly. The temazcal is hygiene, medicine, and small resurrection in one, prescribed for everything from sore muscles to childbirth recovery. The Europeans who later encountered it, coming from a continent that feared bathing, regarded it with deep suspicion, which tells you most of what you need to know about who was right. Clean, fed, warm, the Tlaxcal's evening trinity. Now listen, because the city is doing something out there in the dark, and it's the thing this civilization did best of all. Between the meal and the music, there's a lull in the courtyard, fire-lit and full, and it fills the way Aztec lulls fill. The grandmother, having assessed the company, decides it's time somebody's fortune got discussed, because in this world, listener, who you are was signed and dated before you did anything at all. Alongside the farming year runs a second sacred calendar, 260 days, turning like a smaller gear inside the year's larger one, every day in it named by a number and a sign: 1 reed, 2 rabbit, 7 flower, 10 eagle. And the day you were born on is not trivia. It is your tonally, your day sign, your heat, your portion of fate, a kind of astrological birth certificate that this entire civilization takes as seriously as your century takes genetics. Born on a strong day, you're reckoned marked for fortune. Born under 4 dog, they say wealth will find you even if you hide from it. Born under a drunkard's sign or a gambler's sign, and the whole neighborhood knows what current your boat was launched into. It matters so much that families cheat, and the system politely lets them. When a baby arrives on an ill-omened day, the soothsayer, every district has one, with his painted books of days, is consulted, pages are turned with much frowning, and the naming ceremony is simply scheduled a few days later, under a better sign, the way one might file paperwork in a more favorable jurisdiction. Everyone knows. Nobody objects. Even fate, in this most fated of worlds, accepts a reasonable appeal. You can hear both halves of their heart in it. This is a civilization convinced at bedrock that the universe runs on schedule, the same conviction that keeps the priests counting stars tonight. And yet it is equally convinced that a person can lean against their fate. The elders' speeches insist, over and over, that the child born under a bad sign who lives carefully, works, rises before dawn, and shuns the pulque, can wear their fate down like water on stone. Destiny here deals the hand, conduct still plays it. 500 years before anyone frames the debate in your century's terms, the grandmothers of Tenochtitlan have settled nature versus nurture around 10,000 evening fires. Both, obviously, now sweep something. So the lull fills. The grandmother reads the company's fortunes like a woman shelling beans. The master's boy, born 7 monkey, will charm his way into trouble and probably out again. The boy grins. This is his favorite inheritance. The cousin's baby, coming any week now, is being openly lobbied toward arriving after the unlucky stretch ahead, as though the child were a negotiating party. And you? Someone asks. The boy asks. Children always ask. What sign the Tlacotli was born under? And here the fire ticks, and the grandmother watches you over her spindle, because it's a realer question than the boy knows. Somewhere behind your hard year, this world would say, a day sign was doing its work, the famine sign, the debtor's sign, the sign of roads that bend. You give the boy your honest answer. You don't know. Your naming was long ago and far from here, and the grandmother does an unexpectedly gentle thing with it. Then it isn't written yet, she says, more or less, and goes back to her thread. A slave with an unwritten fate. In the deep grammar of this world, she has just paid you something better than a compliment. She has left your ending open. Take that out to your mat later and turn it over. For now, the lull is ending on its own, the way courtyard lulls do, because across the water, right on schedule, the drums of the young men's house have started, and the whole district is beginning, softly to sing. Sound carries over water, and Tenochtitlan by night is a lake of embers wrapped in music. From the neighborhood's house of youth, the Telpachkali, where the district's boys sleep and train, comes drumming and massed young voices, because evening is when the schools become choirs. Every child of this city, remember, is schooled, and a startling share of that schooling is exactly this. The Quickakali, the house of song, where the whole culture's memory is taught to the next throat. History here is sung, theology is danced, the great deeds, the calendar's meanings, the speeches of the elders. All of it is committed to melody and drilled, evening after evening, because a civilization that writes in pictures keeps its library in its people. What you're hearing across the water isn't recreation, it's the empire backing itself up. And above the school's drumming, on festival evenings, floats the art this world prized over gold and feathers together, poetry. They called it in Xochitl, in Cuicatl, the flower, the song, one idea wearing 2 words, their name for poetry itself, and some scholars think, for the only kind of truth humans can actually reach. The great lords composed it, so did priests, women, provincial nobles gathered for contests of it in flower-hung courtyards, and the poems that survived, written down after the end from the memories of old singers, circle and circle the same handful of unbearable gentle questions. Do we really live on the earth? Not forever on earth, only a little while here. Even jade shatters, even gold is crushed, even quetzal plumes are torn. Nothing lasts, the singers say, and then in the very next breath, so let there be flowers, let there be song, let friendship pass the cup one more time around, because we came to this garden briefly, and the garden was real. 6 centuries downstream, in your soft bed, you know things this city didn't, and it knew this one thing, wrote it in flowers, better than nearly anyone since. Their empire terrified their neighbors. Their laws could be granite. Their gods kept terrible accounts. And their poetry, given one voice to speak with forever, chose tenderness about how brief everything is. People are like that. Whole civilizations are like that. It's the most consoling contradiction in all of history, and it's rocking half of Tenochtitlan to sleep out there right now in massed young voices over black water. The household fire is banked, the mats are unrolled. The day's last duty is yours, of course, the courtyard's night tidy, the gate's bar checked, and then your corner, your mat, your maguey cloak pulled to your chin. But you won't sleep quite yet, and neither will we, because the night watches are sounding from the temple, and the last hour of this journey belongs to them. Lie back on your mat at the courtyard's edge, under the deepest sky you have ever seen, 7,000 feet of altitude, zero electric light on the entire planet, and the dry season air of the high valley. The stars over Tenochtitlan are not the polite scattering your century knows. They are a ceiling of crushed fire, horizon to horizon, the Milky Way laid across the middle of it, like a white river, and this city is watching them back. On the temple platforms, all across the island, the priests of the night watch are at their posts, tracking that sky with a seriousness your world reserves for markets and missiles. They know its calendar cold. The Pleiades crossing the zenith at midnight. There, that little knot of sisters, you can see it from your mat, is an event of state here, watched at each great cycle's turning to confirm that the world will continue. Astronomy in this city is a branch of reassurance, and through the night, on schedule, the watches sound. The low moan of the conch trumpets from the temple summits, the deep wooden voice of the great drum, incense going up from the braziers, whose glow you can just see, a red star among the white ones, at the top of the great temple's silhouette. 4 times, 5 times through the dark hours, the priests rise, sound the signal, feed the fires, and mark the sky, the whole city's clock, run on devotion, so that no one in 200,000 souls ever wakes in the night without knowing roughly what hour holds them, and that someone up there is on duty. The old ones in the courtyard remember the greatest night this sky ever staged. Once every 52 years, when the 2 calendars finish their long interlocking dance and return together to their starting point, this civilization performs the most breathtaking ritual of trust in its whole repertoire, the binding of the years. On that night, every fire in the empire is put out. Every hearth, every temple brazier, every torch, the old god himself extinguished, from the emperor's palace to the poorest Chinampa hut, until the entire valley lies in a darkness no living person has ever seen it wear. Households climb to their rooftops and wait, eyes on one hilltop south of the lake, where the priests watch for the Pleiades, that same little knot of sisters above your mat, to cross the top of the sky and keep going. Proof that the heavens have not stopped. Proof the world has been granted 52 more years. And when the stars pass the mark, a new fire is kindled on the hilltop, and runners with torches stream down and out across the causeways, like sparks off a struck flint, carrying the flame to every temple, every district, every hearth, until the whole valley has relit itself from a single point of light. The grandmother saw it as a girl. Children not yet born will see the next one, or so, on the night we're visiting. Everyone has every reason to believe. Listen to tonight's first watch sound now, that long, grainy ocean floor note rolling out over the lake, answered faintly by the shrines of other towns along the far shores, the whole valley telling itself the time. In the compound around you, the families breathing, the settled fire ticking, a turkey muttering some final grievance, the fish smell and copal smell and lake smell of the finished day. Somewhere across the water, a last canoe knocks softly against a mooring pole. The singing from the Telpuchkali has stopped. The city of canals is asleep, all of it, the emperor and the fishermen, the judges and the gamblers, the weavers and the water sellers, and you, Tlacotli, at the courtyard's edge, right at the bottom of the whole magnificent lattice, watching the white river of stars with everyone else's day finally off your shoulders. Tomorrow the drums will start it all again, the grinding, the sweeping, the jar under your mat one cacao bean heavier. But you've made it, listener. One full day, dawn watch to night watch, in the strangest and most misunderstood station of the Aztec world. And you know, now, what the title of tonight's journey really meant. Not chains, fluency, a world of invisible wires, crossed only by those who grew up holding them. Let the wires go now. There's one more thing to tell, the gentlest and most important thing, and then the lake can have us both. Every journey on this channel ends with a candle held up to the question underneath it. How do we know? For tonight's world, the answer is more moving than usual, and it belongs to you because it is, in the most literal way, a story about family lore. First, the hard part, said gently and once. The city you walked through today had, on the night we visited it, about 25 years left. The strangers from the sea came in the year one read. There was wonder, then misunderstanding, then war, and the sicknesses the strangers carried, which no one on either side understood, did what no army could have. Within a generation, Tenochtitlan, the lake city, was gone, its temples quarried, its canals filling in, a new city rising on its bones that would one day be among the largest on earth, and would keep, hidden in its street grid and its Chinampa suburbs, and its very name, the old city's ghost. Mexico. The people, though, hold on to this. The people did not vanish. Their descendants are tens of millions strong tonight, and over 1 million of them still speak Nahuatl, the language you fumbled all day. Civilizations fall, grandmothers are harder to stop. And that is exactly how we know what we know, because a generation after the fall, something remarkable happened. Men arrived with paper who wanted everything written down, and chief among them a friar who spent the rest of his long life on a single project. He gathered the elders, not the victors, the elders, the old men and women who had been young in the living city, who had swept its courtyards and heard its night watches, and he sat them down with trained scribes, sons of the old nobility, writing in their own language, and he asked them, year after year, decade after decade, tell us how it was, everything. The gods, the laws, the markets, the crafts, the herbs, the riddles, what a midwife said to a newborn, what a father said to a daughter, what the slave dealer's arcade looked like, what you ate. And the elders told them, 12 books worth, thousands of pages in Nahuatl with painted pictures, assembled over 30 years, the great encyclopedia we now call the Florentine Codex, one of the most extraordinary acts of memory in human history. Nearly everything I've told you tonight, the sweeping, the three warnings, the collar law, the market escape, the price of a dancer in cloaks, the words of the elders to the children, comes down that single fragile pipeline from old people remembering out loud to grandchildren with pens. And we should say, softly, what almost happened instead: nothing. This world wrote beautiful painted books, screen folds of deerskin and bark paper, whole libraries of tribute rolls and histories, and books of days like the one the soothsayer thumbed at every naming. Almost all of it burned, some in the war, some in zealous bonfires afterward, some simply to damp and time. Of the thousands of painted books that existed on the night we visited, the ones surviving from before the fall can be counted without running out of fingers. That is the cliff edge every civilization's memory walks beside, and that is what makes the Elders Project miraculous rather than merely admirable. On the far side of the burning, memory found one more way across, out of the ashes, through the grandmothers, onto the friar's paper. History survives the way families do, barely, stubbornly, and because somebody told the children. Do you see it now? Why I asked you, at the top of tonight, for the oldest story your family still tells? Because that is all history is. That's the whole secret of this channel, told plainly for once. History is not marble. It is grandparents talking, and someone, anyone, bothering to listen. The Lake City survives because its elders told its story to the next generation one time more than fate expected. The story your family tells, the voyage, the farm, the name, the rumor, is the exact same pipeline, one flood or one forgetful generation from vanishing, and every time it gets retold, somewhere a small Tenochtitlan is saved. So tell them. Ask the old ones while the asking is good. Write it down badly. Badly written is infinitely better than gone. The elders finished their telling long ago. The scribe's ink is 5 centuries dry, and their city is waiting for us, one last time, down at the bottom of the night. Come back to your mat, then, at the courtyard's edge, for the last few minutes of the watch, and this time, don't hold anything. Just lie where the day left you, and let the city do what it's doing, which is nothing beautifully, everywhere. The fire is a red whisper under its ash. The family's breathing has found its one slow, shared rhythm, the way sleeping households do. Above you, the white river of stars has wheeled a little further along its course, exactly on schedule, confirmed by sleepy priests on cold platforms who have already fed the braziers and gone back to their mats. The night is holding. Let your own breathing match the household's. In slowly, through the nose, the way the cold mountain air likes to be taken. Hold it a moment, the way the lake holds the stars. Out even slower, and let the shoulders go with it. The basket shoulder, the paddle shoulder, all of it. Again. In like mist rising off morning water. Out like a canoe sliding the last silent length to its mooring. The sounds are only these now, and each one is on your side. Water patient against the canal steps, a foot below the sleeping city. The banked fire ticking as it cools, keeping his own old watch. Reeds conferring somewhere in a night breeze, too gentle to cross the courtyard. And once, far off, from the temple's high shoulder, rolling across the black water and the 10,000 moored canoes, and the floating gardens standing quiet in their checkerboard, the conch of the deep night watch, long and low and unbearably peaceful, telling the whole valley what it tells it every night of every year. All is well, the sky is moving, sleep. If sleep is close now, let it come. Nothing after this needs remembering. And if it's still circling, give it this to circle with, the lake, holding the whole city the way your bed is holding you. Feel that, the mattress carrying every ounce, asking nothing back, the way the water carries the shinampas, the canoes, the island, the temple, all of it afloat and none of it falling. Every breath out, sink a little further into being carried. The Aztecs built their entire world on the faith that the water would hold it up. Tonight, just for the length of a night, borrow that faith from them. It held for 100 years of nights. It will hold for yours. So sleep. You've earned it twice over tonight, once in their world, once in yours. Let the two of them blur now, the way they've been trying to all night. The lake and your bed, the maguey cloak and your blanket, their stars and whatever is above your roof, right now, holding steady. Somewhere in the dark between those two worlds, 5 centuries wide and exactly as thin as a closing eyelid, all the people of tonight are still doing what we left them doing. The grandmother is grinding tomorrow into being. The child on the Shinampa is still hoarding worms of great value. The runner is forever crossing the market boundary into the open air of the law, the crowd forever parting, the whole magnificent, intricate, contradictory lattice, holding him up at last instead of in. Let them keep it all out there in the dark. You don't have to hold any of it anymore. Not their day, and not yours. Thank you for spending this night on the lake with me. If tonight's journey helped you drift, the subscribe button is down there in the dark somewhere, quiet as a moored canoe. And tomorrow, when the sun's been paid for and rises anyway, I'll be in the comments, reading the oldest stories your families still tell. Bring me a good one. Until then, the watch is kept, the fire is banked, the water is patient. Rest easy, sleep well. This is Drowsy History.